I have a long-standing interest in endocrine disruptors, and that came about in a rather curious way. I'll tell you that story. It is the story of Dr. Joe's vegetarian goulash. It takes me back a couple of decades. A little corner store near my house, they had a deli counter, and there was a Czech immigrant chef who fancied that he could cook up all kinds of meals. And one day he made something he called goulash. I tasted it, and it didn't taste quite right. It didn't have the right paprika. And of course, the right paprika is Hungarian paprika. So I decided to show him. I went home and I cooked up a big batch of goulash and brought it into the store. He tasted it, he liked it, and there was a lot left over. He decided to package it and offer it to customers. A lady walked by and she said, there's meat in that goulash, isn't there? I said, of course there is. Goulash is made with meat. He says, well, have you ever thought of making a vegetarian version? And of course, I had never thought of that. This is not a piece of my Hungarian culture to make vegetarian goulash, but I thought I would give it a try. But what do you replace the meat with? So I thought about tofu, even though I had never worked with this stuff ever. But I did make a version, and I replaced the meat with tofu and took it back to the store, and they started to sell that. Another lady came by one day, said, your goulash has tofu in it, right? I said, yes. Says, I can't eat that. Why not? Says, because I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and they told me not to eat anything made of soy. And that then triggered my interest in endocrine disruptors, because soy contains naturally occurring compounds called isoflavones, and those can behave like estrogen in the body. And there is a type of breast cancer known as estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. And when the body produces estrogen, in these cases, it can trigger this irregular multiplication of cells that ends up as breast cancer. Not all breast cancers are of that type, but there's one particular variety that is. And doctors have always told women not to eat any kind of soy if they had this kind of breast cancer. So I started looking into this. And it turns out that, in fact, there have been a large number of studies about this that have examined the relationship between soy and breast cancer. And the studies are overwhelming, showing that there is no issue here. If anything, soy, especially if consumed around the age of puberty, protects women from breast cancer. And there are thousands of papers now that have been published on this issue. And the issue is that there is no issue. I think there's no problem in consuming soy products, but of course, treat it as a food. It's not a medication. It's not a drug. So I've learned a great deal about endocrine disruptors, and these days, of course, there are some legitimate issues there, because aside from chemicals that can be found naturally occurring in foods, we have to confront things like phthalates, which are plasticizers added to plastic to make them soft and pliable. We have bisphenol A that is used to make some of the lining in food cans that can leach into foods. Then we have the perfluoroalkyl substances, some of which are endocrine disruptors. So anyway, it's a very interesting field. And there are some concerns there, but I think not with soy. So I did come up with this version. It's sold pretty well. Unfortunately, the store went out of business. So the only place that it ever exists now is in my kitchen, where I still sometimes make it. But I must admit, there's something still missing from it in terms of flavor. Meat.